All right, hello everyone. Sorry, I did not mean to be blasting your eardrums. Hopefully that sound level's about right. It looks like it should eyeball about correctly. Thank you all for tuning in. This is day 8 of Rebellion Without Rehearsal spoiler casts. It was a big day for Scoops, and I'm very excited to have three wonderful guests on today. First up, I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves, say a little bit about their history with Netrunner. First up, wowarlok, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, hello. Yes, hi, I'm wowarlok. Uh, I've been playing Netrunner for a while now. I think I started back in 2017 when the revised core set came out. Um, I'm excited to be here. Today has been, like you said, a big day for Scoops. We have a lot of cards to talk about, so I can't wait to get in.
All right, NotAgain, you're up next.
Hello everyone, it's NotAgain. I started playing, I think, a year and a half ago, but I played a lot, so it does not feel like it has been a year and a half. Probably double it.
All right, Thrantar, I'd love to have
All
you
right,
come in now.
thank you. I'm Thrantar. I started following Netrunner. It was recommended to me around the release of the first part of Borealis, and I started actively playing around the release of the second half of the Borealis cycle.
Very cool. So yeah, we've got this is one after having many days of all old heads, we got some nice fresh new faces on the cast today, which I'm excited about. And we've got quite the pack of cards today. First up, we have Amelia Earhart. This is Jonas's champ card, also known as TBU3K on the internets. It is a resource virtual companion. It is 0 credits to install. Whenever a run on HQ or R&D ends, if you accessed 3 or more cards during that run, place 1 power counter on this resource. When your turn begins, you may remove 3 hosted power counters and trash this resource. If you do, the corp loses 10 credits. This is 3 influence. So Warlock, I'm going to throw to you for first takes on this card.
I'm excited for this. This card seems great. First of all, the art is amazing. This set has had so many cards with like great art that would go on a playmat, and I think this one is like up there in the very high part of the cards that I really want to see in a playmat. But this card looks very powerful to me. Charging it sounds a little challenging at times. You have to access 3 cards, which is not easy, but we have had so many tools. So many tools came out recently to access 1 more cards. Mercury, of course, works with this great. So anything that adds 1 more card in addition to Mercury would already trigger the Amelia counter, and the second part of the effect is just bonkers. 10 credits is a lot. Like asking any corp that's trying to score behind ice to keep 10 more credits than they used to protect their agendas is a big ask. Like try to ask PD to have 10 more credits than it's supposed to be, and they're gonna crumble.
Yeah, I think that 10 credit is a very big ask. Uh, Venture, I'm kind of curious what your take is on this card. I feel like it's
Okay, so the first thing I see, I look at this, I see access 3 or more cards during that run, and I think legwork, I think Maker's Eye, and I think Steve, because um, sort of the headlock Steve with all the econ denial with the 3 diversion of funds, you just recur them and keep the corp broke and you emergency shut down some stuff. And de-res their ice, and then you go in again and recur one of the doofs and go in again and steal other credits. It's not a good deck right now, but it's certainly a deck people have experimented with, and this is an amazing piece for it because the Maker's Eyes and the legworks that you want to be running already as you go into HQ and are keeping this economic pressure up to get in with them.
yeah.
Removing the 10 credits on top of that is going to keep their ice down and let you keep coming back in, recurring Amelia Earhart again, because it's not an RFG, it just self-trashes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good shout out. I think uh, when you say like, oh yeah, we should be playing Maker's Eyes and Legworks, it immediately reminds me of like CTZ's Do the Worm deck that he took third place at Cascadia last year, which like that's a pretty good showing. Wasn't a deck that saw the most popularity, but that is like one avenue to take Amelia Earhart, and maybe Steve is the right home for that, so that you can play all of these kind of again.
Yeah. The other quick thing I noticed is that this is a virtual resource, and there are a couple of cards in the virtual resource package. And as a zero-cost virtual resource, even if it is unique and it does potentially self-trash at some point in the future, if you decide that's more valuable, it could still be useful to turn on your Odore, which is a very interesting killer. That if the meta is right for, it could be good.
Yeah, that's an interesting shout out. It's not a card I think about often, but definitely has a couple of powerful points to it in the right situations. Not again. I'd love to hear your take on this, on some aspect of this card.
So my first thought looking at this card is, why is this printed? 10 credits is a lot. And my answer to that is, we can finally make bad cards good, so people can finally play ScapeNet. It's free for HD. I can finally play ScapeNet in every deck without everyone questioning me why.
It's now a tech card for every matchup, so it can't be bad.
Exactly. And like at 3 influence, like I feel like it can be worth that influence for splashing it in Anarch or Shaper, especially since Set can access a billion cards now and charge this up. And it of course has synergy with Padma, which, well, I don't know if a lot of people play Padma after Boat is gone, but I know somebody does.
Yeah, someone on the NSG design team certainly seems to really want Padma to come back, so we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. This card seems like it has this card has a really high ceiling, right? 10 credits is a huge chunk. But 3 accesses is also like, outside of Mercury, as we were talking about earlier, like to actually get to 3 accesses, you often have to do quite like you have to be pretty invested in a twinning. Like that's only every other term of the twinning. Maybe you can combine stuff with like a wake implant. I just see people calling out potentially in Shaper, but maybe you import the conduit into Criminal. If you can get the conduit to 3 virus counters, you can actually charge up Amelia Earhart all in one turn potentially by just clicking conduit 3 times.
So this is sort of why I like the Maker's Eye and the legwork, is because they give you all 3 accesses and don't like it's play the card, get 3 accesses.
Yeah.
I think a safe home for Amelia is also in Zaya, where you're already incentivized to access as many cards as you can in a single central run. So you get value off of triggering the Amelia, and you can keep up the pressure, I think, like this.
Yeah, no, I for sure. I think like the Zaya decks definitely feel like they're a good home for Amelia because they are all about the multi-access. But we do have a good chunk of cards, so I'm thinking we might actually want to move on to the next one, unless someone has any kind of closing thoughts about Amelia Earhart.
Please ban.
It's gorgeous.
Quite the difference of thought here. All right, we've got the first of the 3 cards I spoiled today. Actually, in the set number, they're 22, 23, and 24. Interesting how that happened, I guess. This is Trick Shot. It is a 1-cost run event in Shaper. It says place 4 credits on this event. You can spend hosted credits during runs. Run R&D. If successful, place 2 credits on this event and access 1 additional card when you breach R&D. When that run ends, you may run a remote server. 3 influence, and flavor text 8 billion corner office. So NotAgain, I'd love to get your take on your favorite faction first.
As the resident Shaper enjoyer, I think this is probably the best Shaper card printed this set. Like, not on power level wise, but there's like a lot of decisions on it. And I like that there's more cards that have more decisions rather than start of turn. Place 2 credits on Paladin, place X credits there, and you know what I mean. And like I feel like it's pretty flexible too. Like it's an overclock, but it's also Maker's Eye, almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, it says run R&D and it's a Shaper card, but that's good, right?
Yeah, I mean, I get, they're Shapers always run R&D because they often have a lot of stacking triggers on R&D, and so if you can find a way to combine Trick Shot with some of those triggers, that's probably a good outcome.
Yeah, and you get 2 credits to, like, if you spend the 4, you get 2 more to, like, maybe trash the Rashid as you saw, or to use on the remote.
Yeah. Yeah, wowarlok, I'm kind of curious. Like, what were your first impressions when looking at this card?
This card is really intriguing. I can't figure out how, like, what's the correct play pattern with this, and I think there's many, and you have multiple options. Clearly, it works with like all the R&D pressure that Shaper have, so triggering the conduit to put an additional counter on it, or maybe capitalizing off of your Pichasau or Cubans on R&D with Arisana and triggering those Trojans and stuff. But it looks like a very powerful tool to like keep the central pressure up and then use some credits to contest maybe a different server, maybe HQ, or go back to R&D and access more.
Yeah, I mean, you can only
Never
run a
mind, this remote server.
Yeah, it says
Yeah.
only a remote server, unfortunately. They were onto the deep dive trick. This would be a pretty crazy 1 credit deep dive enabler if it allowed you to run on a
guess you're right.
central. So maybe NSG is saving us a bit there, but
I've seen people play Mobius in Arisana, like with a couple of copies since it's really low on influence, and this is like just straight up better.
yeah. Well, it is funny how it's like, oh yeah, Mobius is a better version of a Shaper card that has all the same text except it just doesn't gain any credits. And then now we get Trick Shot, a Shaper improvement on Mobius, which is like quite significant, I think.
I think legend goes that Mobius was supposed to say HQ and was misprinted or something.
Yeah,
but
I think
don't
that
quote
was.
me on that.
I have heard that legend as well, and it certainly sounds correct, even whether or not it is. Thrantar, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Trick Shot.
I'm not quite as optimistic, I think. I think the fact that Trickshot prices you into a mandatory run on R&D when you play it can be quite awkward at many stages of the game. If you're playing, against Tincheki and, there's an Anansi hanging out and you haven't built up your echelon yet, you can't really play this Trickshot. So I think there are lots of situations where you'd want the Trickshot effect, you want the credits, but you just lose all of the credits getting through into R&D and then don't actually have the credits to go in and contest the remote. So in that respect, it can be much worse than an overclock where you can just go and contest the thing you want to contest directly. This only helps contest the remote if you can get into R&D cheaply. But if you can get into R&D cheaply, I think there are lots of better ways to win than Trickshot in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point on it for sure, and I think it is that balance of like, are you trying to win on R&D or are you trying to like control the board, and that's going to be a really tricky line to find with Trick Shot, and I think why to me I honestly compare it more to cards like Overclock than I do to I've seen some people saying, oh, it's an Overclock and a Jailbreak. Can I spell?
And I don't think it's necessarily that good as an overclock because you can't spend the overclock credits where you want to spend them necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's the big limitation, right? It's like Jailbreak and Overclock kind of combined, but more restrictive than either of them, right? You can only run a single server in both of those cases, and you only get a higher payout if the run is successful. Well, actually, yeah, you only get the higher payout if the run is successful, in which case maybe you're already doing pretty well. But
Also, I'm just going to touch back on Deep Dive for a second. While this doesn't have explicit synergy with Deep Dive, where it's not sort of giving you that extra click to get the full Deep Dive off, there's still a number of situations where the corp can be trying to fork you, and you can do a Deep Dive and also check the remote, which is cool in a lot of cases.
yeah, I think Vector is just calling out like, oh, this opens up the like, oh, I want to run R&D, and this lets me run R&D and then clear out the spin doctor with the like run a remote server run, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, base for the spin doctor as well, right? For the trash. It's exactly
that's
2
true.
credits.
Yeah, that's a nice. That's really nice. I wonder if that was intentional. I also Ballround Woo is calling out in the chat there is a way to make this actually run as central, and that is by playing Slipstream. You just need to have the corp kind of obliged by having 2 of the same ice res, one on a remote and one on a central you want to get to, but then you get to kind of climb on through and slip around. So maybe that will be the ultimate trick shot.
Well, it comes.
I think they can be different ice. I think you're confusing yourself with Copycat, which
I am
has
confusing myself with
long
Copycat.
rotated.
Thank you. Yep. I am definitely confusing myself with Copycat. Okay. Yep. Wow, Slipstream better than I thought. As I read the text. Yeah, maybe that's a real threat for trick shot decks.
Slipstream is a wild card when it works. It just sometimes doesn't do anything whatsoever.
Yeah, but this is like a zero
It's
cost
either
of
amazing or
wheels,
terrible. Yeah.
right?
Uh huh.
This is a zero cost wheels for the deep dive decks, which is maybe kind of funny. Same influence, but very cool. I also want to shout out. I love this art. I know it's probably not everyone's favorite from the set. I think, but this is like such a neat Netrunner art to me. And as for those of you who watched the Metropol Grid stream last night, another Ed Mattian banger. So I'm a big fan.
So my real question about the art is we see the 4 corp logos on 4 of the balls, but there are 2 more balls that we can sort of see in the background, and I don't know whose balls those are.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I can't tell if they're just like other copies of like NB Eng, Techie, HB, and Wayland, because they look like the other balls are probably the corp colors.
But this could be like Global Sec and Ampere or something.
Yeah, it could be other ones, but who knows?
So we need to ask Narrative what's the deal with online future pool, right? We need to know the rules.
For sure. All right, I think maybe we should move on to the next card. This is one I've seen, I think, quite a bit of buzz about. This is Cataloger. 2 cost hardware. When you install this hardware, load 2 power counters onto it. When it is empty, trash it. Whenever you make a successful run on R&D, instead of reaching R&D, you may remove 1 hosted power counter to look at the top 4 cards of R&D and arrange them in any order. Click hosted power counter, breach R&D, use the ability only if you made a successful run on R&D this turn for influence. So Thrantar, I'm going to start with you. What are your initial takes on Cataloger?
Sorry, you cut it there for a second.
Oh, I was asking what your initial takes are on Cataloger.
So this is definitely a callback to indexing. This is also more power counter synergy, and it's a hardware, so I'm going to shout out Rigging Up, which installs a hardware at a discount, which installs a programmer hardware at a discount of 3, and then charges it. if I recall correctly. And the free charge is nice, although I don't think this is necessarily a card where, based on how it's set up, the free charge does anything necessarily. In that the obvious pattern is you run, you take the indexing effect, and then you spend the other hosted power counter to get the breach and get the agenda off the top that you just moved there. And if you're freaking up, you have another counter left for later, which is for an indexing in the future, which is nice, but doesn't have that immediate follow-up combo.
I mean, if you see two agendas, it does let you steal both of them,
Yes.
right? Which is maybe something you want to talk about.
Yes, if you see two agendas, you can steal both. That's a nice upside. Two doesn't quite use the full discount of freaking up, but it's still pretty good. The click compression is nice. The power counter is nice. Indexing was a card that was played already historically.
There's some discussion going on in the chat of how does this work or not work with trick shot, and so I think that's actually an important thing to talk about with Cataloger. It says when you make successful run on R&D, instead of breaching, resolve this effect. So you won't get the you won't get the additional card access from trick shot, but you do get, all of the rest of effects from Cataloger. So you can play Trick Shot, resolve Cataloger, and then still get the +2 credits placed on Trick Shot and make a run on another server. So like there's a nombo on part of the effect of Trick Shot, but also a combo on another part. So, it's probably a little bit worse than just playing an overclock because it's 1 credit worse unless you're getting some value off the other run you're making. But these sort of run events, you can combine run events with Cataloger, which I think is a really unique point about its power. But NotAgain, I might throw it to you for some thoughts on this card.
So indexing was pretty strong, but I guess the self-trash on this makes it a little more balanced. But I feel like you don't ever need to use the second, like the clickability on this, because you can just play Mind's Eye. So you have an injection that's there forever, and you can get access R&D whenever you want. Most importantly, I guess, this and Trick Shot both, they combo well with Akiko. Like, sure, nobody's ever going to play that ID, but a free Maker's Eye and every R&D is pretty good. Well, free if the corp does not pay anything but a 0, but sure. Also, I know exactly one person whose stream is going to make this and Mind's Eye work almost every week, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's an interesting thought. Do you play this with Mind's Eye because you charge up Mind's Eye as you expend the Cataloger? But I don't know. It's an interesting potential combo. I guess wowarlok, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Cataloger.
It's interesting. I think it has 2 modes, and we talked about them both. As like one where you have a hard time getting into R&D, so you get in one, you see the top 4 cards, and then you don't have to run again to snipe the agenda that you want. And the other where maybe R&D is a little easier to pierce, so you keep the second counter and or third if you rig this up, and keep the indexing going and just use your next click to run again on R&D to steal whatever you find. It's interesting. I don't know how much play it'll see, because I think it's a little limited as like effect. In this thing it was strong, but 5 card is considerably more than 4, unfortunately. So I don't know how much that 2 cost hardware that then you have to click to run will see play over the more regular stuff, I think, in Shaver.
So actually, the other thing quickly to shout out is that if the prevalence of trap effects increases, right? then there's additional value in the indexing portion of the indexing.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think another thing I
Dodging
might
traps.
yeah, another thing I might think about here is like I think it increases the value of a card like Hermes, where like this is actually like paying 2 to see 4 cards is, out of R&D is kind of costed normally at a core damage. And this is saying, oh, we'll trade a core damage for a click kind of thing, but then we get to see 4 cards again later. And so you might be able to set up some kind of silly Hermes plays or like that kind of control runner where you have a lot more sense of what's happening. And it's one of those things where like if people haven't played with indexing a long time, the ability to stack what the corpse next 2 or 3 draws are going to be is also like a real part of the power of these sort of effects, because you can go, okay, what do I think the corp needs the least? Let's make sure that that's what they draw next. If you whiff on finding agendas, or even when you don't, which can like be an impact. Like we have cataloger, we have burner. Like shapers are getting some ways to make corp draws kind of tough, which I think is an interesting aspect of this as well.
The mind games that I really want to see with this card is against that score Flower Sermon. So like the runner does some indexing bullshit and then the corp, I don't know, just draws the card. So like, do you put the other card as the third card? Do you put it as the second card? I don't know. That seems like a fun game.
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
can't
interesting.
wait to. I can't wait to fire a cataloger and then look the corpse straight in the eye as they have a spin doctor on the board and see if they manage to they shuffle before I access or I actually do get the access to the agenda or not.
And
Yeah.
the clear ability is good against Spin Doctor, right? Because if you put an agenda on top, they either pop the Spin Doctor and you still have the power counter, or they don't pop the Spin Doctor and then you just click and it's too late, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, yeah, the corp had like there's a paid ability window after the run ends, and that is the last chance the corp has to use their spin doctor. So you can just do a significant pause, okay, snatch, and if they don't, you can just say okay, or like if they do, then great. Now you can just actually run back on R&D again, see a brand new set of 4 cards, and try and
Then you
snipe
get
it
the
out.
index, yes.
Yeah, get that second indexing off. So, like, cataloger to some extent is going to be better against these shuffle effects than, indexing was, which is, an interesting place for it to land. Yeah, I'll be interested to see. I feel like this to me, like, is actually a really nice tool for Shaper, because it applies like a good chunk of pressure quite quickly after install. It's not like a conduit where I have to dedicate like 7 clicks before the corp really cares. But this says, oh yeah, with 2 or 3, well, really with like 3 clicks, I'm threatening at least 2 points, or I'm probably threatening an agenda, which I think is a really nice little a nice little piece for Shaper in terms of making them a little bit stronger overall. But actually, I guess one question is, does anyone here think you might splash this out of the faction, or is it kind of not strong enough for that?
At 4, I don't think so. Maybe an as because hardware, but
Yeah, 4 influence seems a bit prohibitive on this kind of effects, I think.
Yeah, I'm splashing it in my binder.
All right. Well, seems like no love for Shaper tonight. Let's see how. Well, actually, that's not quite true. But I think we've got one final Shaper card, and this is Coalescence. This is a 2-cost 1 MU program. When you install this program, place 2 power counters on it. Hosted power counter, gain 2 credits, uses ability only during your turn, is 2 influence, and it has a just frankly beautiful piece of art by Yakuza, who just really knocked it out of the park. So with that, I will turn it over, I think, to wowarlok to have a first spin at this card?
I think this is what Shaper's dreams are made of. I think this card is exactly what a lot of Shapers have been waiting for. The kind of effect that can help Aesop's Pawn Shop come back, and all the power counter synergy and charging this out of Padma or stuff like this or instantly nets you 2 credits. But I think all the kind of install runner and all back to 2019 Haley decks that played a bunch of programs that gave you something on install or just to be there and then hit the bin quickly. This is exactly the card people have been waiting for. Importantly, this is not a virus, which is the contrast with Cash, which was like a similar card that had a very similar effect. And my favorite interaction with this and the fact that it's not a virus is with Brahman. You can bounce it back after you gain the 4 credits from the 2 power counters, and then you can draw it and install it back with stuff like, well, by hand or using something like Q loop to put it back on the board and gain money again.
Oh man, I wish Eternal was slow enough and also the courts would install enough ice to make that a fun interaction, because that does seem kind of sick. Where it's like, oh yeah, maybe this is just how Shapers break ice from now on in Eternal. That would be kind of sick. That'd be pretty cool.
That looks really fun.
Yeah. NotAgain, I'd love to have you take a swing at Coalescence.
So as Phil in the chat is saying, 2 credits. Yup, that seems about right. It really does not feel like a good enough value at 2 credits. So I assume you have to run it with Aesop's, but the contrast here is that Ari does not want to sit and play install Shaper. It's more of an aggressive thing. So how do you balance that out into getting credits at Coalescence when UAV probably just gives you more credits for what you need to do? Which kind of then you have to pivot to Aesop's, which, what other targets are there?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I guess what I would say is one thing I'm looking at is that UAV allows you to one of the challenges that our Sauna decks can have is how do I turn UAV credits into cash that I'm actually allowed to spend? Excuse me. And playing, if you bounce a Trojan and then install a Coalescence, you actually gain 4 credits, not 2. And so now you've played a sure gamble, sort of, right? It's come at some other expenses, but that is sort of the well, that's how Shaper's economy works. It's twice as complicated for the same effect as a sure gamble. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's some potential includes there. I think also, I'm going to mention spec work. I think it's a potential card to look at here as well. And actually, I think slightly understated, but I like art. I like quite a bit from Ashes. But Thrantar, I'd love to get your take on Coalescence here as well.
Okay, so I'm going to go for a very deep cut here. Before rotation, I was playing a deck built around DZMZ Optimizer and the classic 2-cost 1MU install runner program from Station 1, Customized Secretary, which is a card that possibly no one other than me has thought about this year. But it does want a critical density of programs that you can have in your deck and put into play and get profit off of. And I think that there's a potential package here with this and with Aesop and with Propeller where you just install a cheap program every turn, use it till it's done, then get rid of it. Because there are now, I don't know if we have the critical mass of programs you need, but there are programs that are usable and disposable already. And I think there are many decks where I'm happy to just run 3 propellers and go, this is going to provide 80% of my fractor needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
And when
that
one
is
is done, I'm going to sell them.
that is quite the deep cut. I think I would say if I'm playing a 2-cost draw 5 card that I want to be a little janky, I might look at
Is it
Joyride. Yep. um,
See, but that
'Cause
requires you to run, and that's not install runner.
yeah, no, that's true. But yeah, I do think, especially, to move your point a little bit, like DCMZ also synergizes with Coalescence, which
Oh,
I
that's by
think
itself,
is,
yes.
yeah, which is already kind of a thing that, like, a lot of Shaper decks will run some amount of DCMZ, and so suddenly now you're getting 3 credits off of a card that you were already running. It's not great. You still probably need a second synergy point. But I think one thing that makes people get very excited about the Aesop's decks in particular is we now also have Muse. So, like, one of the reasons Shaper players were very excited about Muse was because, unlike SMC, sticking around can actually be a big upside for Shaper because of our good friend Aesop's. And so now you have like 2 targets for Aesop's, which suddenly represent like 6 credits that the deck didn't have before. Which that can sometimes be enough to take a deck from unplayable to real consideration.
And again, if you have a critical mass of things like environmental testing or technical writer, is that still in rotation?
It is not, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah. Ooh.
But if you have enough effects like that where you have some incidental value on the installs or make the installs cheaper, then it's very possible to want these just sort of this sort of grease that you just put in and pull out again. That
Yeah.
gives some
I think
value.
another card we should probably shout out is Rejig, that becomes a gamble when you have a Coalescence down, and if you have any reason to play Rejig to reset a Propeller or an Oiler and stuff, it could be a good enough card, I think, in that kind of deck.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout. Like, people used to play Scavenge, and which was like a mainstay of like that style of toolboxy, like turn my trash into treasure kind of Shaper deck. And we do have like support for that, right? We, as you were saying, we have Oiler, now we have Coalescence. Like, once you get enough targets, that deck starts to look really good. And I pulled up Simulchip, which again, will also turn a Coalescence into a sure gamble. Though obviously it comes down for 1 as opposed to 0. We've also somehow not mentioned World Tree, which this
So I can sell it too.
yeah. Like, Coalescence seems like it fits really nicely in some World Tree builds where it's like, okay, I'm getting some aggressive runs early. I have a program in my, like, I don't need a breaker yet, so I can go and fetch Coalescence, make 4 credits, and then make a run next turn and go and get the breaker I need to get. So, yeah.
If only Cabanezeva was still in the format, she would have loved Coalescence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's like, yeah, because Cabanessa could just like pull Coalescence out from the deck and gain 3 credits from doing that, right?
Yes. You couldn't do it with Cash because it was a virus, but once again, this is not a virus.
Oh, Vectors is
What I
calling out.
noticed with all these,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
So what I
again.
noticed with all these, So what I noticed with all the Shaper cards, the Muse, Coalescence, and the new indexing, is that they're all 2-coster. That means 2/6 stocks are way up.
Oh, true. Although I'm not sure you necessarily need to play Cataloger with Kashuk, because Kashuk's going to see 6 if you set it up, and that's more than 4.
Yeah, but then get the shuffle effect, so you can actually do indexing to steal probably more.
True.
Vector is also shouting out a fun interaction, which is if you use Muse to tutor a World Tree, So you're spending 8 and 3 MU. You can then use the World Tree's ability to target the Muse, sell the Muse, and then fetch your other, like fetch a second World Tree. So, an elaborate way to save, you spend, what? You spend 9, no, 2, you spend 11 credits to get a World Tree out at 2 MU. So that's, definitely something.
At that point, I would suggest you use SMC to tutor SMC on your Muse and use that to find the World Tree, but it is a line that's possible, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, SMC does seem like it's going to do that job a little bit better. But yeah, does anyone have any final thoughts on Coalescence before we move on from the Shaper cards?
The first thing I thought of when I looked at this was, I wish this was an icebreaker so I could put it on Baba Yaga.
Oh God.
Do you want to? I'm pulling up Baba Yaga. Do you want to explain a little bit why that might be so exciting?
Baba Yaga just has the abilities of all the icebreakers hosted on it, and with Coalescence and a Puffer both installed on a Baba Yaga, you've managed to build your magnum opus.
I was thinking you were gonna say, oh, you'll install oh no, but if you install like a propeller that doesn't put counters on it. Okay, right. I just realized we do have a way to do an infinite amount of actions that achieve no effect right now. If this was a whatchamacallit, if this was an icebreaker, you could pay 2 credits to put a power counter on Baba Yaga and then gain those 2 credits right back. So
right. That's not an infinite number of actions; it's an infinite number of paid abilities. But
yeah, and then I have to update the OPP to. Actually, no, we already have rules for that in the other policies, in the actual game policies. So, saved by the bell there, I guess.
Also, it might not be an icebreaker, so there's that.
Yes, that too. Well, one day we'll get a way to turn an arbitrary program into an icebreaker, and in that day, Eternal will shake in its boots. All right. I think that's enough Shaper Hour for this stream. We have a couple more cards. This card was spoiled on the Metropol Grid stream by Patrick, who did a wonderful job of pranking Andre. This is a 0-cost operation out of Jinteki. It is called Bring Them Home. Terminal, Black Ops. Play only if the runner stole or trashed a corp card during their last turn. After you resolve this operation, your action phase ends. Reveal and add 2 cards at random from the grip to the top of the stack. Threat 3, you may pay 2 credits to reveal 1 card in the grip at random. The runner shuffles it into the stack. And this is 2 influence out of Jinteki. So, NotAgain, I'm going to throw to you again first here for your takes on this card.
So we're on to the good cards now, so that's one thing. Second thing is, I feel like it's just one more card away from actually being, very good, or, I'd even say decently playable. 3 cards, shuffling 3 cards is good, but I would have liked it if it was 4, because then it actually opens up some threats. Because, the problem with Jinteki is, the non-punitive Jinteki is that you're often just bleeding agendas, and by the time you're at 3 or 4, I assume it would be around 4 more than 3, I feel like it would be really game point, and at that point, maybe shuffling 3 cards back in won't be as beneficial. The best use case I can think of is an unrezzed anemone protecting the Fuji and the Daniela, but having that set up in a late game is a bit too difficult.
Yeah, I wonder if you can.
Just, yeah.
Yeah,
it's just barely. 1% away from being good kind of card.
Yeah, I guess I'm also wondering, like, oh, can you do something like you play a Bring Them Home, and you install like 2 Reaper functions on the table, and you have some bladder wards ticking or something, right? So like and then Bring Them Home just kind of closes it out in an asset deck where the runner has to choose between trying to trash your stuff or losing all their cards again. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Thrantar, I'd love to hear your take on Bring Them Home here.
Okay, I've got a couple different thoughts. One, this reveal and add to the top of the stack at random. This is sort of our actual tempo net damage, where what it actually generates is tempo. There's no kill threat. It's a terminal. You're not going to easily follow it up with something to actually flatline the runner with. I'm seeing a couple of interesting possibilities for this. One, this could potentially be a replacement for, what's it called? The NBN ice that bottoms 2 cards that's used to protect CityWorks projects.
Data Loop.
Data Loop, yes. This can potentially replace some number of data loops in the CityWorks project decks. On the one hand, it's not a permanent ice that stays in play. On the other hand, it doesn't cost 7? I recall Data Loop being actually shockingly expensive.
And yeah, Data Loop does cost 7. With only 1 real subroutine for the runner to break most of the time.
Yes. So I think this is less persistent than Data Loop. It's an operation and not a piece of ice. On the other hand, you're saving 7 credits, and really you probably only need to protect the CityWorks project for 1 turn before you advance it up to 4 or 5, and then if the runner touches it, they die, so it's, mostly self-protecting at that point. I'm also going to shout out the flexibility where the initial reveals and adds to the top of the stack, and then the threat shuffles. So you can decline to pay the threat after you see the 2 cards that got added to the top of the stack. If you're already going, the runner doesn't have anything good to draw next turn. You can just leave them drawing bad things. Or you can pay 2 and leave them with fewer cards and have no clue what they're drawing.
Yeah, that's an interesting line. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm going to play this for pure tempo and like play this out of a scoring deck and just say, you don't have your breakers yet, or at least I didn't see the breakers in your hand, so I'll put them back on top of your deck, which is kind of interesting for this. Wowarlok, I don't think we've heard your thoughts on this card yet.
I want to start by talking about the art, because I think this is the second half of what happens in See How They Run. And I think that's a very good narrative moment. We have Adrian Sayes using their psychic powers to scare clones, and then these Atea operatives snatch them up when their guards is down. That sounds like one of the most evil way to catch someone. That's very Jinteki, I think. Mechanically wise, I think this card is interesting. Opens up a bunch of forks, but definitely isn't obvious which ones they are. One thing we haven't talked about is that with the threat text, it can be a good way to get around steel skins and stuff like that. Jinteki hates having to deal damage through that, and shuffling them back in the deck when like Anarchs hold them for a long time, waiting for the right moment to draw to when you take a damage. That's like a good way of maybe changing the balance on a situation where the runner thinks they have the upper hand.
I like that as a call out. This is a way to get the steel skins out of hand without causing any damage. That's a very, very nice include.
That briefly reminded me of something, and I forgot it again.
I mean, it's to some extent it can do the sort of Salem's Hospitality thing, in that respect, but without doing any of that other stuff. And yeah, people in the chat are calling out a lot of other quite things that are somewhere.
It's a sort of riot suppression in some ways, where it just taxes the ability of the runner to do things next turn.
Yeah, I mean, this probably is a 2 credit cheaper riot suppression this good chunk of the time, where the runner does have to spend 3 clicks drawing back up because Jinteki is Jinteki, and so you need your
Oh, the
command
other thing's going to shout
size.
out. House of Knives.
Oh, okay.
If you have a House of Knives scored and you put 3 cards on the bottom, they probably just have to take the turn off and draw, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's quite possible. You know, I think the Flatter Ward asset decks really kind of do like this card because it just really dictates what the runner's allowed to do on their next turn, and maybe you need to play Bring Them Home and Oppo or something, but yeah, there's a lot going on here. I think. Now, whether or not this sees a ton of play, I'm not entirely sure, but it's an interesting card to think about. In
One
the
last
interest of,
shout out.
oh yeah,
Sorry,
please.
I think this is mean with Genetics Pavilion. We'll see this in Eternal, I think, because it's just more
Oh.
grindy stuff out of IG.
What? Oh no. Oh, I didn't think about that interaction. Oh goodness. Well, I guess I gotta get even more tech in my runner deck somehow. Or I guess it's just Rumor Mill OP, right? Um,
Oh yeah.
just can't play without Rumor Mill anymore. All right. Yeah, that's a very good shout for Eternal though. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Next up, we got our first, Wayland card. This one comes to us courtesy of the QTM podcast. This is Eminent Domain. It is a 3-1 agenda. It is an expansion and expendable. Click, credit, reveal, and trash this agenda from HQ. Install and res 1 card from HQ, paying a total of 5 credits or less. When you score this agenda, you may search R&D for 1 card. Install and res that card, ignoring all costs. Thrantar, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this agenda?
Sand City Grid.
We're fast
is
advancing. Yeah.
Yeah. So if there are lots of board states where you can just sort of put a Sand out because the thing costs 5 or 6 to trash, the runner is not necessarily going to run in and trash it immediately. Then next turn, you scored Eminent Domain on it. You install and res an archer in front of your Sand City Grid, ignoring all costs.
That does sound like that sounds both like a plausible board state and a very frustrating one for the runner. So I like it already. And this is an agenda you probably don't mind sacking to an archer later in the game.
If you need to res a second archer, you can do it. Yeah.
Do you feel like, and this maybe I'll ask wowarlok, do you feel like there's a use case for this where you actually use the expendability, or are you really playing this to try and score it every time?
I think Wayland has a bunch of very expensive yet pretty strong eyes. I think we'll see one later today. So there's a very good chance you use it to install some big eyes and trade 1 point for maybe 2 or 4 as you score your Oak Towns or your Atlases behind eyes that your opponent can't go through very easily. So yeah, absolutely. Also, the effect is when scored is really strong, and paired with Tucana, I think we'll see Wayland slinging ice everywhere every time they score something.
Yeah, Tucana actually is another great shout out. Those decks, Tucana decks do often want to get 2 or 3 triggers off, and this basically adds an extra trigger to that, which is kind of cool.
Let me see the chat in chat. You can also just use, if you've got two of these, use one to res your Sand. The thing costs 6 to res. Install and res it for 1.
And NotAgain, I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts on this card?
What I want to do with this card is score it and then res a Cloud Eater for free in outfit. Maybe actually a super modernism kind of outfit with Cloud Eaters and of lines or something can finally work.
Yeah, I like that as a potential include of like, hey, generally people are going to want to be taking the like Cloud Eater's softest mode is usually taking the tags, and so maybe you can do some combination here and make the tags a real downside for the runner.
You unfortunately lose the first part of the card in Cloud Eater because you
Oh, that's a
res it
good
when you
point.
score the agenda.
Yeah, that is a notable downside for sure.
It's
Uh,
still a big sentry that protects your server, so
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
trade-off for sure.
It becomes a 5 cost 3 subroutine 6 base strength. Like that's compared to Seisenton, which is also 5 cost and 3 subroutines but has 2 strength. I think that's a notable one and a still decent include potentially. I had not realized how much time had passed, so I'm gonna try and keep us moving through these last couple of cards. But any other thoughts on Eminent Domain? I will say again, Kira doing fantastic work. I think this is a great like atmospheric piece of art and quite fun.
Yeah, once again, Wayland muscling through poor people to uh, push their agenda forward.
Vectors is asking, can you use the when scored ability on a card that can't be installed or rezzed? I don't think it can be used on a card that can't be installed, but it can be used on a card that can't be rezzed. Or actually, okay, I guess you can search for a card you can't install, and then you don't do anything else with it.
I think you have to
So,
reveal it to prove that you can't install it.
I mean, you can always fail to find. So I think you can just say I failed to find any installables. Um, but then you can install an agenda. You have to reveal that it's an agenda so that you can't res it, and then you keep going.
But I think you can search for. Okay.
And you can just all. But yeah, I don't think you can't find an operation to do anything with this, because an operation can never be installed. All right, we've got our next card. This is another agenda for Wayland. This is a 5/3, the Basalt Spire. When does this agenda have no subtype? Or do I just have a bad image? I wonder. When the runner steals this agenda, you may add 1 card from archives to HQ. When the runner steals this agenda, you may add 1 card from archives to HQ. When you score this agenda, place 2 agenda counters on it. Host the agenda counter, trash the top card of R&D. Add 1 card from archives to HQ. Use this ability only once per turn. Apparently this does indeed have no subtype. All right, NotAgain, I might start with you. Where are you excited to try this first?
I'm very confused about this card. Like, it definitely goes into Nuvem, but my question is, what are we recurring with it? Are you just building a punitive deck and then maybe a punitive gets trashed to Nuvem and you can get it back? But the recursion feels real weird to me. And it's a 5/3, and it's not it does not protect itself, which is kind of annoying to put in your deck. Like, even CityWorks Project has some protection.
I don't know, Thrantar, can you think of other stuff you might want to do with this card?
I think.
Oh, Thrantar, you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, I think this has a potentially great home in Ampere.
All right. Do you want to explain a little?
I think the recursion is better the more different things you have to recur, and also in Ampere, the trashing the top card of R&D is guaranteed to be a unique and never seen before card in your deck that might not in fact be replaceable and you might need to get back.
Yeah, I think also, I'm just checking because I don't know this off the top of my head. Yeah, so you can use Basalt Spire to trigger the Nuvem ID ability of the gaining 2 credits. Just because it's the first time each turn you Oh, so now you can use this to get Nuvem value on the runner's turn, which is kind of cool.
Yes.
Um,
I'm also looking
I
at
think
this sort
Nuvem
of.
is only on your turn, I think. During each of your turns.
ah, that's such a weird. Yeah, yep. No, I see that, but that's interesting, I guess. Oh, I
Also
guess it
looking at
was
this
sabotage. Yeah, I don't know.
sort of double Vitruvius, and thinking to myself, what if we just recur seamless launches or something?
We just play PD out
We
of
just play
Wayland.
PD and Wayland.
Yeah, I mean, we do see some big ice and stuff for Wayland, and like Nuvem does seem like it's going to make a lot of money. People in the chat are also calling out like other cards you might want to recur are like Slash and Burn, right? You can fast advance an agenda. I don't know what deck is playing 5/3s and slash. Like maybe there's a way to play Slash and Burn and Basalt Spire in the same deck, and this lets you kind of put your Slash and Burns at less risk.
Right, so I mean, you have 2 Slash and Burns in hand and a Basalt Spire installed already. So you Slash and Burn, advance, score, and then you immediately use the first agenda counter to bring back the Slash and Burn, and have the second agenda counter for when the runner runs archives to go and try to get the other Slash and Burn.
Yeah, that is a nice little loop. Warlock, I'd love to get your thoughts on the Basalt Spire.
I think the Basalt Spire probably plays quite well in like slower Wayland decks, something like the BTL that Sokka used at Worlds. So I'm expecting the ability to usually recur something like border controls, or even 3 lines that we expanded to advance a Phyros or something. So that's the first few targets that come to mind. And I can't remember if Grudgeworks gets removed from the game when it's empty. Otherwise, that might be a very cursed recursion piece.
Drudgework does get trashed, so you can Basalt. If you score a Basalt Spire, you can shuffle back 6 agendas. No, 9 agendas with a single Drudgework.
So have fun never seeing agendas ever again for the runner side.
Yeah. Well, or they're just all in
Those
R
get
and
very
D, right?
dense in R&D.
Yeah.
So I got a shout out, if you want to grind, if you could just recur, to Urban Renewal.
That's also true.
Oh, maybe Basalt
Okay,
Spire.
sure, I'm trashing 2 cards, but you're trashing 8 cards, so...
Oh yeah, Descent also thrashes and doesn't remove, so that's another piece you can recur if you really want to hide agendas.
People are also calling out Sudden Commandment if we want to go for real combo nonsense. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's like, this has big first step 1 score a 5/3 energy, but I guess in theory you can steal it and get a little piece of a combo back. So I don't know. I think this is definitely an interesting agenda, and like decks that were running SDS drone deployment might think about playing Basalt Spire, because like recursion from archives is a really powerful effect.
Vitruvius counters are good. This is a big Vitruvius.
Yeah. This is a 2 advanced Vitruvius that gets you an extra point along the way, and all it costs you is some cards off the top of your deck, and who needs those?
Exactly.
All right.
The only card in your deck that matters is the last one.
Next up, we've got Hammer. Hammer is a Century Destroyer Observer. It is 6 to res and 4 strength, and it has the rules text: during each encounter with this ice, the runner cannot break more than 1 of its printed subroutines except using killers. Then it has 3 subroutines. Give the runner a tag, trash an installed resource or piece of hardware, trash one installed program that is not a decoder, fractor, or killer. And this is a Scott Uminga piece. So, Wirelock, I might start with you. What are your initial impressions of this ice, and what decks might think about playing it?
The piece of art is amazing. The shout out to Anvil and Hammer makes a lot of sense. I think Scott also did Anvil, so the style looks very similar. I think this ice is great against some of the more non-regular runners. Like it's pretty good against mulch in general. It deals with like you can't break most of it with Botulus and Audrey, so it's perfect hate for that kind of cards. Although I think it's a little soft in regards of like actual not regular breakers and killers in this case. So it's hard to see if a deck can spend one or two maybe ice slots for this in case your matchup is very bad. When your mulch matchup is very bad, or if you might prefer more regular ice and just kind of play through the matchup that way.
Yeah, I could see in the meta that we're exactly in right now. I could see like some of those like Wayland Glacier decks playing one or two hammers just to really kind of mess with the Lu mulch or Hoshiko mulch players, because they don't. Yeah, as you were saying, they don't have a very good solution for this card. It's gonna probably give them a tag and you know probably trash one of their programs. But like there's not you don't really want these subroutines to resolve, and it's not a bad face check either if people kind of are running without their sentry breaker somewhat in the mid game. But and that is like a thing that Wayland sometimes lacks is like punishing face checks. So this isn't the worst for that. Now again, what are your thoughts on this card?
Really love this card. So if you like zoom in into the anvil part of the art, it's sort of like the Wanton Destruction art, which is a pretty good art. But like it's sort of like a hammer going down on that Wanton Destruction kind of vibe. But mechanically, like 6 strength 4, it's basically just the same numbers as Ansel, which is I would say a pretty strong sentry. And I feel like the subs on this are more stronger than Ansel, or well, I guess two trashes, like the 2 trash subs are combined are stronger than the 1 trash sub on Ansel, which I feel like that's something I care about more. And the text on it to like not work on boomerangs, Botulus, or whatever is just the icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
Prims cannot face check with just a 4-strength turtle anymore.
Yeah, that is a nice little thing for Crim for like a lot of these matchups where runners will play aggressive early with a pretty minimal rig and use AI or these kind of bypass or other tricks to kind of keep it down. Thrantar, I want to get your thoughts a little quickly on this card.
Sure. So I think Hammer, with the name, with the flavor text, with the art, it's clearly a companion to Anvil. And I don't like it. I don't think they've got good mechanical connection, and I don't think Hammer and Anvil server is really an especially strong server.
You're right. That is a little bit of a bummer. I think the art pieces are amazing, and they do feel like two different perspectives of the same like moment in time.
Yes,
Which
the
is
art pieces are great. The names are clearly connected. Like there's this thematic tie. And I just don't think there's the mechanical synergy that makes me go, I want this Hammer and Anvil server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. Someone is calling out, this is, Shishu is calling out in chat, this is probably better than Colossus, which is, maybe not the most meta-relevant ice, but I think I would generally agree. So, yeah, this is also kind of a big swordsman, as Cephalopod is saying. Now, whether you really want your swordsman to be big, or if you actually are okay with a smaller guy, we'll see. But all right, let's move on to the penultimate card for today. This is another Wayland Ice. This one is from QTM. The last one was from Stimslack, I believe. This is Logjam. This is a 6 to res barrier ice with 0 base strength. But hold on a second. You can advance this ice. It gets +1 strength for each hosted advancement counter. When you res this ice, place 1 advancement counter on it. plus 1 advancement counter for each card type among face-up cards in archives. Then it has 3 subroutines. Gain 2 credits, end the run, end the run, end the run. So this is another entry in Waylon makes big fuck off barriers. Wowarlok, I might start with you on your thoughts on this card.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. This is the big fuck off barrier that Wayland has, akin to stuff like Adrian's Wall and other huge barriers like that. I like it. I don't know how easy it is to fuel the archives to put enough advancement counters for this to be relevant. I suppose with 3 different types, it already hits 4, which is 1 above Cleaver, which is already like 4 to break for Cleaver, which is okay. And you can keep advancing it to push it farther and farther away from a good break for the runner. The fact that it's completely immune to Boomerang, because all 3 subroutines end run, is also a very important part of this card. I like it. I think it'll see some play.
Yeah, I think that's a really good contrast point to Pharaohs, which doesn't end the run to Boomerang or Botulus as consistently, whereas like this will, well, it won't be the Botulus that's been sitting for too long, but it will always be the Botulus if it's been installed that turn, even with cards like Cookbook out on the table. But yeah, Thrantar, I'd love to get your thoughts on Logjam.
This is 2 influence, which means that this is reasonably importable, which means I can play it in Pravdavost Big Beal.
That is that is a fun shout out. We can for a few more months we can Big Beal our way to victory out of Pravdavost, and that's just jam up the centrals. How are you getting? I guess you're just not getting that much value off the res, right? Because it's probably only got 1 or 2 types.
Yeah,
but...
one or 2 types. You just need a place to dump the Pravdavost counters.
Yeah, and like
making a 10 strength barrier with 3 end of the run subs is a fine place to store.
Yeah, this maybe does work a little bit better than Pharaohs for this deck for kind of the reasons we were talking about before, where this is more resistant to a lot of the bypass style tools.
Ferris is also just 3 influence, and influence is really tight when you need to import RPC and Biotic. And well, I think there's a cheaper option than Biotic these days, but...
Yeah, I think you don't need to import RPC, you don't need to import Biotic anymore, as long as you can keep a trashable operation in hand.
Yes.
So that'll be fun.
And if you can Glacier up enough, there's a world where you just never advance things in the remote, and if they ever don't clear it, you just Biotic. Sorry, not Biotic, RPC, but it's still tough on influence, and 3 is much better than 2 if you're looking to splash a copy or 2 of a giant barrier no matter what you're playing.
Yeah. Though actually, I'm thinking that this... So the line I was thinking of to talk about your deck is playing Sudden Commandment and RPC, but I don't think that actually works because you have to install your BL on the board and then Sudden Commandment, and you can't play a triple with a second click Sudden Commandment. So I think that maybe doesn't work, but someone will have to correct me in the cut later. NotAgain, I'd love to get your thoughts on Logjam.
So Wayland really set up big fuck you to Crim this set because both the ites are just huge Crim hits. I guess all the bad fractures that Crim has here. I mean, sure, it like at one point it gets even very bad for even Cleaver to break it, and I'm sure all the Glacier enthusiasts even would like advance it to, I don't know, 8-9 strength, because like you have wall to place counters on it, you have the card that we're going to see today to place counters on it, you have tree lines, and like there's just a lot of ways to put counters on it. So it comes back to just how much do you pump it, or do you just make them ignore the server entirely? And I think the most like Softguy's list from Warlords has a good enough answer to just sit and do nothing for 20 turns and keep advancing log jams on centrals or and the remote and then just wait. It just
Yeah.
feels so bad against every currently existing fracture.
Yeah, I mean, I think this card. It's interesting because like this card on res, I feel like isn't going to be fantastic against every fractor, unless you're like midway to the late stages of the game when there's a lot of cards face up in archives. But it does scale in a way that we haven't seen in quite a while, and it's getting some support that we haven't seen in quite a while. And I think speaking of that support, we'll hit the last card we're discussing today. This is Isaac Liberade. Is a 3 to res upgrade Byroid Sysop. And it is 2 influence, 2 to trash. Each advanced piece of ice protecting the server gets +2 strength. Whenever this upgrade moves to the root of a server, you may place 1 advancement counter on a piece of ice protecting that server that has no advancement counters. When your turn ends, you may move this upgrade to the root of another server. So, Thrantar, I kind of curious, where are you seeing Isaac going first? Or where are you excited to try out Isaac first?
I really haven't had that much time to think about Isaac yet, and I'm not sure. 3 to res is measurable. The 2 strength is also measurable, but I think you need some way of getting the advancements for free, or profiting because you're built to last. I think this makes manual clicking for advancements better, but it's still not that exciting. Obviously, you get the 1 free from the shuffling, which means that you can also use this as a really weird copy of Lacosta Grid if you want to run Isabel.
I thought you were going to say Hearts and Minds, which we did see this set, which you could potentially use as a pseudo Lacosta Grid as well. But you're thinking of Isabel Beekeeper, so you can use this to like you have a server of
your very weird daily quest.
Yeah, that is a 2 card 5 credit daily quest, but it doesn't give the runner 2 credits, I guess. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think people calling the chat. So I think there's some interesting stuff with Built to Last here, where I think it's actually a bit of an anti-synergy.
It's a mixed bag, certainly. Might be good in SSO.
Isn't SSO also unadvanced?
Yes, but it's giving you a bunch of free advancements. You'll get all of your ice advanced very quickly, so it'll have +2 strength.
Yeah.
You're just caring about half the ability, right? But you're getting all of it online very fast.
No, that's a good point. Wowarlok, I might go to you for what your thoughts are on Isaac.
The number of numbers this card has is extremely high, unfortunately. The other card that I think doesn't work very well with this is the yellow eyes that drains 3 from the runner when it's advanced. I can't remember the name.
No, I just typed in it wrong. It's Mesnachestvo.
That one, thank you, exactly. Because when you remove the counter, it loses the +2 strength, so you lose half of the ability of Isaac.
Oof.
That being said, the +2 strength is very significant, especially in a meta where lots of runner are on Turbine and Corps are already trying to edge out this by playing big eyes. So I can see a world where you play this and try to move it a couple of times between a safe central and your remote, and slowly advance every ice you have on a remote until it becomes really hard to enter. But for 3 cost and a very slow plan, I don't see this making that big of a splash.
Yeah, I always worry whenever it's like, oh yeah, here's this card, it perfectly counters Turbine, and then it's like, well, does it counter two turbines?
Two
And
turbine?
I really hope we don't end up in a world where it's how many turbines can the runner install versus how many Isaacs can the corp get out. Now, obviously, Isaac is unique, but facetiously, how many Isaacs can the corp get out?
Yeah, there's a little bit of conceptual worry for me here, but I'm not like panicking.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing. I'm not necessarily happy with this thing right now. We'll see how it plays. We'll see what comes along in the future.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's also worth mentioning this is not unrelated, but a slightly different take on K-On! Grid. It feels like to some extent, and this is also Wayland's moving executive of the, because we've seen it's Vovo does it for HB. We have a Jinteki
Adrian
one as well.
does it for Adrian
Yes,
says.
Adrian. Thank you. It does seem like Wayland maybe got the worst of the bunch here, though we haven't yet seen if NBN gets one. So maybe we'll see about that.
How does a full Spicolosis ops?
But also, NotAgain, I haven't gotten your take on this, though. Given how you felt about Treeline, I have some guesses about how you feel about Isaac.
Yeah, I like Isaac, but the mistake here is that everyone is thinking about it in Wayland. Why don't we put it in Architects of Tomorrow and make big Bioroids? It literally says Bioroid on the card. And 8 strength Bran is fun.
That's a fun little interaction. Yeah, you can res him for free out of Architects of Tomorrow, and then start bouncing him around and be like, "Are you really going to go chase this guy? If you do, well, I get my ID triggers. If you don't, well, I basically am getting all of my ice bigger and bigger and bigger."
Yeah, I was thinking about this in just a pure Glacier build of Prov.
Yeah. Actually, I feel like Arctic Tomorrows are very funny and like quite clever included. But yeah, Provitos is obviously also a home for this guy as well. Very neat. Well, I think with that said, we've gone a little bit more over than I intended to. So I want to say thank you to all three of you. Thank you. And I'm going to start wrapping it up. So as a note, tomorrow night, the stream will be starting an hour later than usual. So it will start 20 minutes ago tomorrow, however that works. So in 23 hours and 40 minutes. But yeah, thanks, wowarlok. Thanks, NotAgain. Thanks, Thrantar. It's been wonderful talking with you about these cards. And I might ask as we sign off, what you're most excited to play when the cards come out, or maybe a card that you're most hoping to see out of the few we have left. So, wowarlok, of those, what's kind of getting you excited to play some more Netrunner?
I'm really excited about all the Sebastiao package, all the Schrodinger's tag, tag and remove the tag every time. So that's the first thing I'm going to build as soon as the set comes out.
Fantastic. All right, NotAgain, how about yourself?
So NSG was very kind to me and gave me a champ card called See How They Run.
All right, excited to see. Well, okay. Personally, I'm not looking forward to that, but I perversely am looking forward to seeing how you destroy me with that card. Thrantar, last but most certainly not least, what are you most excited to do when the set drops?
So I'm hoping in the cards we have left that we get a big fractor or a big decoder for my Spark deck.
Okay.
I want the Spark of Inspiration and get something other than Cleaver and Buzzsaw.
That makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, thank you again to my guests. Thanks to everyone tuning in. I will see you all at 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow with another 3 wonderful guests. And until then, I'll see you on the net.
FlyQuest. think this is smart organization here from Busio. A little bit less typical for a tank support to go towards Mikhail's, but you have to think about when you're in control like this, how do you lose the game? You lose off picks, you lose off a Nico route, you lose off of a Chains of Corruption. Being able to have that Mikhail's plus the Locket, keep your carries alive here. If you can keep Masu safe, he has his cleanse plus Mikhail's now on top, it's going to be so hard to kill that guy.
Keep Jensen at 0 deaths as well. I like that scoreline. That's looking too good.
Yeah, I mean, he has the biggest shutdown right now, and I imagine that he is the one that is trying to play